This is not just the story of David Goggins. It is the story of what happens when pain stops being something you escape from and becomes something you deliberately train with. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort, hoping that motivation will save them, waiting for the right moment, the right feeling, or the right circumstances. This story begins where that illusion ends. By the end of this story, you will understand why most people quit long before they reach their true limits, not because they are weak, but because they have never been taught how to stay when everything inside them is screaming to leave. You will understand how discipline does not simply improve performance, but slowly rewrites identity. And you will understand why the strongest version of you is not built in comfort, praise, or ease, but in pressure, repetition, and suffering. This story is not about muscles, running, or extreme endurance. Those are just the visible symptoms. The real subject is the mind under stress. What happens when excuses are stripped away? What happens when the past is no longer used as a reason to quit, but as raw material for growth? This is a story about taking control of the only thing you truly own, your response to pain. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls. It depends on mood, energy, and inspiration. Discipline is different. Discipline is mechanical. It works when you are tired. It works when you are bored. It works when no one is watching. This story will show you why motivation may start the journey, but discipline is the only thing that finishes it. As you listen, you may recognize parts of yourself in this story: the self-doubt, the anger, the quiet voice that says you are capable of more, even when your life does not yet reflect it. This is not coincidence. This story is designed to confront you, not comfort you. Because growth does not begin when life feels easy. It begins the moment you stop negotiating with weakness. It begins when you decide that pain will no longer control you, and you will no longer wait to feel ready. This is not a story meant to entertain you. It is meant to challenge you. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming who you already are, without excuses, without escape, and without fear forward. Young and soft, young female with an American accent. A young female with a softly spoken tone, perfect for storytelling or ASMR. David Goggins did not begin life strong. He began life afraid. Fear was not an emotion that visited him occasionally. It was the air he breathed. It lived in the walls of his home, in the sound of footsteps at night, and in the constant tension that told him something bad could happen at any moment. Behind closed doors, home was not a place of safety. It was a place of survival. Violence was routine. Control was absolute. Love was conditional, unpredictable, and often absent. Abuse was not an exception. It was the environment. Sleep was rare. Peace was non-existent. Childhood, as most people understand it, did not exist. From an early age, his nervous system learned one lesson well: stay alert, stay quiet, stay invisible. This is how fear becomes normal. When danger is constant, the body adapts. The mind learns to scan for threats instead of dreaming about the future. For David, life was not something to explore, it was something to endure. He was not learning who he could become, he was learning how not to get hurt. School offered no refuge. Instead of relief, it delivered confirmation. He struggled to read. Letters did not stay still on the page. Words felt heavy and slow. Speaking was difficult. His thoughts moved faster than his mouth, and the stutter that followed became another reason for others to laugh. He struggled to belong, because belonging requires safety, and safety was something he had never known. Teachers doubted him. Some assumed he was lazy. Others assumed he was incapable. Few asked why. Children sense weakness quickly. They sensed it in him. He was mocked for his appearance, for his intelligence, for the way he spoke, and for simply existing outside the norm. Over time, the insults became familiar. Then they became believable. Eventually, they became his own voice. Stupid, weak, worthless. These words were not shouted anymore. They were whispered internally, repeated quietly, reinforced daily. This is how pain evolves. It does not stay external, it moves inward. Pain slowly becomes shame. Shame teaches you that something is wrong with you, not with what happened to you. Shame convinces you that you deserve your suffering. When shame is left unchallenged, it demands silence. Silence isolates. Silence protects the pain from being questioned. And inside that silence, self-hate grows. This is how a broken identity is formed. Not in one moment, not in one traumatic event, but through repetition, through daily reinforcement, through years of unspoken fear and unanswered questions. When pain is constant and unacknowledged, it stops being something you experience and becomes something you are. Identity forms around survival instead of possibility. For David, the world became a place that confirmed his worst beliefs about himself. When he failed academically, it proved he was stupid. When he was bullied, it proved he was weak. When adults looked past him, it proved he did not matter. Each experience stacked neatly on top of the last, building a story that felt complete and unchangeable. Most people never escape this stage. They live their entire lives inside the narrative written by early trauma. They do not remember choosing it, but they live by it. They shape their goals around it. They limit their expectations because hoping feels dangerous. They confuse familiarity with truth. The pain becomes predictable, and predictability feels safer than the unknown. This is why early trauma is so powerful. It does not just hurt, it teaches. It teaches you what to expect from life. It teaches you how much you think you deserve. It teaches you who you believe you are allowed to become. For years, David accepted this story without question. He avoided challenges because failure felt inevitable. He hid from attention because attention invited judgment. He learned how to disappear in plain sight. He learned how to survive without hope. Survival became his skill, but it came at a cost. When survival is the goal, growth feels unnecessary and dangerous. As he grew older, the weight of this identity became visible. His body reflected his internal state. Overweight, exhausted, disconnected, and angry, he moved through life without direction. He worked jobs that required no belief in himself, because belief had never been rewarded. Each day reinforced the same conclusion: this is all there is. And yet, beneath that resignation, something remained. A quiet discomfort, a tension between who he was and who he sensed he could be. It was not confidence. It was not optimism. It was awareness. Awareness that the story he was living did not fully explain the pain he carried. Awareness that the damage had a source. This is the moment most people avoid. Looking directly at the damage is terrifying. It threatens the only identity you know. If the story is wrong, then everything must change. Responsibility returns. Choice returns. Fear returns. David did something rare. He looked at the damage and refused to look away. He did not excuse it. He did not romanticize it. He did not pretend it made him special. He acknowledged it. He named it. He accepted that what happened to him was real and that it shaped him. But he also recognized something else. If pain could shape him unconsciously, then discipline could reshape him deliberately. This realization did not heal him instantly. It did not erase fear or shame, but it cracked the foundation of the identity he had inherited. For the first time, the past became something to study instead of something to hide from. Trauma stopped being a life sentence and became information. This is where transformation begins, not with confidence, not with motivation, but with honesty. Brutal, uncomfortable honesty about where the story started and how long it has been allowed to continue. David Goggins did not escape his origin of pain by forgetting it. He escaped it by understanding it. He recognized that the voice telling him he was broken was learned, not born. And once something is learned, it can be unlearned. The broken identity was not destroyed in this chapter, But it was exposed, and exposure is the first threat to any lie that has survived on silence. One moment changed everything. David Goggins was not standing on a battlefield or at the starting line of a race. He was overweight, exhausted, and trapped in a life that felt small and suffocating. He was working a job he hated, waking up every day already tired, already defeated. His body carried the weight of years of neglect, and his mind carried something heavier: resignation. This was not rock bottom in a dramatic sense. It was worse. It was quiet acceptance. Then he watched footage of Navy SEAL training. Men covered in sand, shivering in cold water, screaming from exhaustion, yet continuing anyway. Faces twisted in pain, but eyes locked forward. They were being pushed beyond fatigue, beyond fear, beyond what looked humanly possible. Something about that image cut through him. It was not admiration, it was recognition. For the first time in his life, he saw people choosing pain instead of being chased by it. In that moment, something inside him woke up. For most of his life, pain had been an enemy. It arrived uninvited. It took control. It defined him. But as he watched those men suffer on purpose, a new idea entered his mind. Pain could be selected. Pain could be used. Pain could be transformed from a threat into a tool. That decision changed the direction of his life. He did not feel ready. He did not feel confident. He did not suddenly believe in himself. What he felt was disgust with the version of himself that kept running. And for the first time, disgust became fuel. He decided that instead of avoiding pain, he would walk directly into it. The goal was clear. He wanted to become a Navy SEAL. The requirements were not forgiving. To even qualify, he needed to lose more than 100 pounds in a matter of months. There were no shortcuts, no special treatment, no comfort, just rules and consequences. So, he stripped his life down to discipline. He stopped negotiating with himself. He ran when his lungs burned. He trained when his body begged for rest. He ate to fuel progress, not pleasure. There was no balance. There was no moderation. There was only execution. Each day became a test of whether he would obey comfort or command himself forward. This phase was not inspirational. It was brutal and lonely. Progress was slow and painful, but something important was happening beneath the surface. Every completed workout was not just changing his body, it was rewriting the story in his head. Each act of discipline whispered a new message: you are not who you thought you were. When he finally entered SEAL training, reality hit harder than imagination ever could. Cold water stripped the breath from his lungs. Sleep deprivation blurred time. Instructors screamed relentlessly, not to motivate, but to break. Injuries accumulated. Fatigue became constant. Fear returned in a new form. This was not childhood fear. This was the fear of failure in front of others, the fear of proving the old story right. His body failed him. He was forced out. For most people, this would have been confirmation, proof that the dream was unrealistic, proof that the pain was pointless. But something had changed. Goggins no longer interpreted pain the way he used to. Pain was no longer a stop sign, it was feedback. So, he came back. And he failed again. Again, his body broke down. Illness, injury, exhaustion. He was removed from training a second time. The humiliation was complete. 2 failures, 2 exits. The old identity was waiting patiently, ready to reclaim him. But this time, he refused. This was the moment his philosophy was born. He realized that the human mind lies under stress. When the mind says you are done, it is not reporting truth, it is negotiating comfort. Through observation, through repeated exposure to suffering, he recognized a pattern. When people quit, they are rarely empty, they are simply uncomfortable. This understanding became what he later called the 40% rule. When your mind tells you that you have reached your limit, you are likely only 40% there. 60% remains untouched, protected by fear and habit. The mind does not want growth, it wants safety. Armed with this insight, Goggins returned again. This time, the pain was worse. His body deteriorated under the stress. Stress fractures formed, bones cracked, muscles tore. He ran on legs that felt like they were breaking with every step. He breathed through pain that felt sharp and unforgiving. Blood appeared where it should not have. His body was clearly failing, but something else was stronger. To survive, he began building mental tools. These were not affirmations or positive thinking, they were weapons. One of the most powerful was what he called the cookie jar. Inside his mind, he stored memories of every hardship he had already survived: abuse, obesity, failure, training, rejection. When pain arrived, he did not look forward to the finish line, he looked backward. He reached into that mental vault and reminded himself, I have endured worse. This pain is not special. This pain does not own me. The cookie jar transformed memory into fuel. Past suffering became evidence, not trauma. Each recall weakened fear's authority. This time, he did not quit. Graduating SEAL training did not mark the end of suffering. It marked a shift in relationship. Pain no longer defined him. Pain trained him. He had proven to himself that the limits he once believed in were imaginary. They existed only because he had never challenged them directly. This realization spilled into every area of his life. After the military, he pursued endurance challenges that most people considered insane. Ultramarathons, extreme heat, sleep deprivation, broken feet, shutting organs. Each event was not about competition, it was about exploration. He was mapping the edges of human capability from the inside. Every time pain appeared, it was greeted, not avoided. Voluntary suffering became his method. He chose environments where quitting was tempting and comfort was distant, not because he enjoyed pain, but because pain revealed truth. Under suffering, excuses die, stories collapse, only character remains. Most people live their lives trying to reduce pain. Goggins chose to increase it, carefully and deliberately, because he understood something fundamental. Comfort preserves identity, discomfort changes it. By choosing pain instead of running from it, he reclaimed control over his mind. Fear lost its authority, fatigue lost its voice, the past lost its grip. Pain became a language he understood fluently. This chapter of his life is not about becoming extreme, it is about a decision available to anyone. The decision to stop treating pain as an enemy and start treating it as a teacher. To recognize that growth lives exactly where discomfort begins. Voluntary suffering did not make David Goggins superhuman, it made him honest. Honest about what the body can endure. Honest about how often the mind lies. Honest about the cost of transformation. Pain no longer chased him. He chased pain, and in doing so, he discovered that the strongest version of himself had been waiting on the other side of everything he was afraid to face. After surviving SEAL training and extreme endurance races, people ask the same question again and again: how are you still standing? They expected a secret, a shortcut, a genetic advantage, or some hidden motivation that ordinary people did not have. What they did not expect was the answer David Goggins gave them. He did not offer inspiration, he offered a system. That system became "Can't Hurt Me." For Goggins, pain alone was never the solution. Pain without structure only breaks people. Pain without direction creates bitterness, not strength. What made the difference was organization. He took everything he had learned through suffering and converted it into principles that could be repeated, tested, and applied. This was the moment his life stopped being just a story and became a doctrine. At the core of Can't Hurt Me is a single uncomfortable idea. Growth begins with truth, not motivational truth, not polite truth, brutal truth. Goggins argues that most people are trapped not by circumstances, but by the lies they tell themselves to stay comfortable. These lies are subtle. I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow. This is just how I am. Over time, these statements harden into identity. Goggins insisted that nothing changes until those lies are confronted directly. You cannot fix what you refuse to face. If you are weak in an area, pretending otherwise does not protect you. It imprisons you. Truth in his system is not meant to shame. It is meant to clarify. Clarity creates leverage. Leverage creates change. One of his most controversial tools was what he called the accountability mirror. Every day, he forced himself to stand in front of his reflection and list his failures honestly. Not to insult himself, but to remove ambiguity. Ambiguity allows excuses to survive. Precision kills them. When you know exactly where you are failing, you also know exactly where to apply effort. From this foundation of truth, Goggins introduced the idea of callousing the mind. He observed that physical calluses form through repeated friction. At first, friction causes pain. Over time, it creates protection. The mind, he realized, works the same way. Avoiding difficulty keeps the mind soft. Repeated exposure to controlled hardship makes it resilient. Callousing the mind is not about dramatic gestures. It is about consistency in discomfort. Waking up earlier than you want to, training when you are already tired, studying when boredom sets in, speaking when fear tells you to stay silent. Each action is small, almost insignificant on its own, but repetition changes everything. These acts teach the mind a new rule. Discomfort is survivable. Once the mind learns this, fear loses power, resistance weakens, discipline strengthens. Over time, the identity begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids pain and start seeing yourself as someone who can handle it. Goggins was careful to separate this system from motivation. Motivation is emotional. It depends on mood, energy, and inspiration. Discipline does not. Discipline is procedural. It operates regardless of how you feel. That is why discipline, not motivation, becomes the backbone of his philosophy. Feelings are unreliable. Systems are not. In Can't Hurt Me, responsibility replaces blame. Blame keeps power external. Responsibility brings it back. Goggins does not deny that people are hurt, disadvantaged, or treated unfairly. He denies that these facts remove agency. In his system, ownership is non-negotiable. If your life is not improving, the first place to look is not outward, it is inward. Action replaces excuses in the same way. Excuses often sound reasonable, they often contain truth, but they do not produce change. Action does. Goggins teaches that progress does not require perfect conditions, it requires movement. Even imperfect action builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence reinforces identity. Control replaces fear as the final outcome of the system. Fear thrives in uncertainty and avoidance. When you repeatedly do difficult things on purpose, fear loses its mystery. It becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces its influence. You may still feel fear, but it no longer decides your behavior. What makes Can't Hurt Me different from traditional self-help is its refusal to comfort the reader. Goggins does not promise happiness. He promises strength. He does not promise balance, he promises capability. The system is demanding because reality is demanding. He argues that preparing for hardship is kinder than pretending it will not come. Over time, the system creates a feedback loop. Discipline produces results, results reinforce belief, belief strengthens discipline, identity evolves. The person who once avoided difficulty becomes someone who seeks it, not because suffering feels good, but because growth feels earned. This is not optimism. It is not positivity. It is not belief without evidence. It is discipline backed by experience, responsibility backed by action, control earned through repetition. The system does not care how you feel, it cares what you do. Through Can't Hurt Me, Goggins codified pain into a repeatable method. He took chaos and gave it structure. He took suffering and gave it meaning. Most importantly, he proved that identity is not fixed, it is trained. The system does not ask who you were, it asks what you are willing to do next. After fame, records, and recognition, life tested David Goggins again. From the outside, it looked like the story had already reached its peak. He had survived an abusive childhood, conquered extreme endurance challenges, become a Navy SEAL, and inspired millions. To most people, this was the ending, a victory lap, a place to rest. But life does not respect narrative structure, and it does not stop testing you just because you have suffered enough. Doctors discovered a serious heart condition, a hole in his heart that had existed since birth. It was not minor, it was dangerous. It was the kind of diagnosis that forces people to stop everything, the kind that justifies fear, the kind that invites regret and anger. It could have ended his career. It could have ended his life. Once again, pain returned, uninvited and unavoidable. But this time, pain found a different man. Years earlier, pain would have triggered panic. It would have reinforced the belief that life was unfair and hostile. It would have reopened old wounds and old stories. But the man standing in that doctor's office was no longer defined by reaction. He did not ask, "Why me?" He did not bargain. He did not collapse into fear. Instead, he asked a different question, a quieter one, a more powerful one. What now? That question marked the beginning of his final philosophy, not as a slogan, not as motivation, but as identity. He called it Never Finished. Never finished is not about doing more for the sake of doing more. It is about refusing the illusion of arrival. Most people live as if life has a destination, a moment where effort ends and comfort begins. They tell themselves, once I reach this goal, I can relax. Once I fix this problem, I can stop pushing. Once I prove myself, I can be done. Goggins rejected this idea completely. There is no finish line. There is no final version of you. Life is not a race you complete. It is a system you live inside. And systems do not reward stagnation. The moment you believe you are done, growth stops. Skills decay. Discipline weakens. Comfort quietly takes control. The mind begins to negotiate again. The same voice that once said, "You can't," returns. Only now it sounds reasonable. You've earned rest. You've done enough. You're better than most. That voice is dangerous because it feels deserved. Goggins understood that identity is not preserved by past effort. It is preserved by daily action. What you did yesterday does not protect you today. The body forgets. The mind adapts. Strength, both mental and physical, is perishable. Never finished was his refusal to let yesterday's victories become today's excuses. After heart surgery, he did not retreat from challenge. He adjusted, recovered, and returned to training. Not recklessly, but deliberately. He listened to his body without obeying fear. This distinction mattered. Listening provides information. Obeying removes agency. He learned to respect limits without worshiping them. Never finished also meant redefining success. Success was no longer about medals, records, or recognition. Those were outcomes, not objectives. The objective was internal, to remain dangerous to complacency, to remain capable under stress, to remain honest about weakness. Success became the daily act of doing something that challenged his comfort. This philosophy extended beyond physical hardship. It applied to mindset, relationships, and self-awareness. Goggins believed that most people stop growing not because life becomes easy, but because they believe growth is optional once they reach a certain level. They stop examining themselves. They stop asking hard questions. They stop putting themselves in environments that expose weakness. Never finished demanded constant self-audit. Why did I avoid that conversation? Why did I choose comfort today? Where am I lying to myself? These questions were asked occasionally. They were asked daily. The goal was not perfection. The goal was awareness. Awareness prevents decay. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Never Finished is that it is not fueled by anger or self-hatred. Early in his life, pain was the motivator. Later, responsibility replaced it. The drive was no longer about proving others wrong. It was about honoring potential. He believed that unused potential was a form of disrespect to oneself. Discomfort in this system became permanent training, not extreme suffering every day, but consistent resistance to ease, choosing the harder option when the easier one was available, not because it was noble, but because it kept the mind sharp. Comfort dulls awareness, difficulty restores it. Freedom in this philosophy does not come from ease, it comes from capability. When you know you can handle discomfort, fear loses leverage. When fear loses leverage, choice expands. You are no longer controlled by avoidance. You move intentionally. You act from principle, not impulse. Never Finished also reframed aging. Instead of seeing age as decline, he saw it as responsibility. The older you get, the easier it is to justify stagnation. The system fights that tendency. It demands adaptation instead of retreat. You may not train the same way forever, but you never stop training the mind. This philosophy left no room for victimhood. Acknowledging pain was allowed. Living inside it was not. Goggins did not deny suffering. He denied surrender. Never Finished was his way of saying that circumstances can slow you down, but they don't get to decide who you become. Importantly, this was not a call to chaos. Structure mattered, recovery mattered, health mattered, but comfort was never the goal. Capability was. He wanted to be ready, not relaxed. Ready for stress, ready for uncertainty, ready for pain, because pain was inevitable. Never Finished was the closing of a loop. Pain had created identity, discipline had rewritten it, suffering had tested it, systems had preserved it. Now, Never Finished ensured it would not decay. It kept the cycle alive. This philosophy was not designed to inspire admiration. It was designed to demand accountability. It placed responsibility back into the hands of the individual. No excuses, no finish line, no final chapter. Just the next hard decision. In the end, Never Finished was not about doing more. It was about refusing to stop becoming. Pain creates identity. Long before we choose who we want to be, pain begins shaping who we think we are. Experiences repeated often enough become beliefs. Beliefs become limits. Limits become habits. Habits become lives. This is not philosophy. This is how identity forms invisibly, without permission, until one day you wake up and realize your world has grown small. Discipline rewrites identity, but only after pain is confronted honestly. Discipline is not intensity. It is not excitement. It is not a burst of effort when you feel inspired. Discipline is quiet repetition. It is choosing the hard option when no one is watching. It is action without negotiation. Over time, discipline replaces old beliefs with evidence. Evidence replaces doubt. Doubt loses power. Suffering tests identity because it removes your ability to pretend. Under pressure, excuses collapse. Stories fail. What remains is who you have trained yourself to be. This is why suffering is so revealing. It does not create weakness or strength. It exposes it. The question is never whether suffering will come. The question is whether you will be prepared when it does. Systems preserve identity when motivation fades. Motivation is unreliable. It rises and falls. Systems remain. A system is simply what you do no matter how you feel. When discipline is organized into habits, routines, and standards, progress becomes inevitable. You no longer depend on willpower. You depend on structure. Structure keeps you moving forward when emotions would rather stop. And never finished keeps the loop alive. This idea prevents decay. The moment you believe you have arrived, growth ends. Comfort becomes justified. Weakness becomes tolerated. The never finished mindset refuses this trap. It treats life as ongoing training. There is always something to improve, something to strengthen, something to confront. This story is not here to impress you. It is not meant to make you admire David Goggins. Admiration changes nothing. This story exists to confront you with an uncomfortable truth. If your life feels stuck, it is not because you are broken. It is because comfort has slowly become your ceiling. Comfort is seductive because it feels earned. It whispers that you have done enough, that you deserve ease, that pushing further is unnecessary. But comfort does not protect you. It limits you. It shrinks your tolerance for stress, uncertainty, and effort. Over time, it makes challenges feel heavier than they are. The question, then, is not how strong David Goggins is. That question is irrelevant. The question that matters is simple and deeply personal. What pain are you still running from? What discomfort are you avoiding? What truth are you refusing to face? And who could you become if you stopped running? Growth does not require you to become someone else. It requires you to remove the layers of avoidance that hide who you already are. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to be fearless. You need to be honest and consistent, one hard choice at a time. You are not finished, not because you have failed, but because you are still capable of becoming more. The loop is still available to you. Pain can teach, discipline can rebuild, suffering can test, systems can preserve, and the decision to never finish can keep you moving forward. You are not finished. You are just getting started.